Hi there, welcome to my channel. If you ever searched the internet and you were wondering what the hell is happening between Russia and Ukraine, why on earth Russia attacked Ukraine, you're probably going to see one solid answer. It's because NATO was expanding. This is the main reason. This is 95% of responses, analytics, news channels, headlines, whatever it is. NATO was expanding. Russia was warning about this. This is what they did. And there is 5% that also mentioned that reason, but they have small reasons as well. Here and there, they're going to demonstrate some other aspects of minor things. One of them is that Russian-speaking community was discriminated against, and Russia went there to protect the Russian-speaking community. And these are major too, but one is NATO, second one is Russian discrimination within the Ukraine, and that's why they call Ukrainians to be Nazis, fascists, and stuff like that. And there's other small bullshit ideas, is if West was building chemical labs, biological labs, some nuclear mosquitoes, some infected geese, some TB strains, you name it. I monitor the situation in the region and Russian politics for over 20 something years, and read all the headlines, check all the sources, and dive quite deep and waste lots of time on it. And these excuses are just excuses. There are three main reasons why Russia attacked. They're not valid reasons. Under no circumstances these are valid reasons. They don't justify the attack, but these are the reasons that do make sense in Putin's head and elite's mind of Kremlin. Okay, now if we talk about world globally, pretty much everybody enjoys this war. Almost everybody in the world enjoys this war. There is two groups of people who don't benefit or enjoy this war. This is group number one. It's the Ukrainians. They're being attacked. Their infrastructure being destroyed. Rockets are hitting the towns almost every day. Drones are flying over their heads, and the life is horrible there. I have family in Ukraine. I also have family in Russia, and both sides are being hit, but I am rooting for Ukraine, but it's not because I'm related or anything like that. I was born actually in Russia. Most of my family is from Ukraine, but the common sense is what's important in this story, and reasons why Russia decided to go to war, and the consequences that we're seeing right now. So three major and one small reason why Russia attacked Ukraine. Small reason. We'll start with something basic. Now, Ukraine is culturally quite close to Russia for many years. For over 100 years, they live very close. There is lots of interactions, mixed families, mixed businesses. All that gives Ukrainians certain benefit because they quite easily can integrate into the Russian business partnership. But at the same time, for the past 15 and a little bit more years, Ukraine is trying to shift towards the West, towards the Europe, and they're trying to create some financial agreements, trade agreements with Europe. Now, Russia is not happy about it because Ukraine is also part of Russian trade agreement. So what happens when Ukraine signs trade agreements with Europe? Basically, Ukraine benefits from buying stuff in Europe and bringing it to Ukraine and selling it for bigger profit. So kind of not too competitive from perspective of Russia, right? They didn't look at that as like, this is not fair. But it's a trade agreement. There is no it's not as competitive towards Russia, but in the end of the day, Ukraine spent time, invested resources, try to communicate and build its trade routes and trade bridges and businesses and influence and lobby, whatever it is, whatever it took. And it took years to establish this relationship with Europe. And it was not finished, it was not perfect, but it did give Ukraine a little bit more advantage when trading between Europe and Russia. So this is tiny reason, but again, it bites into Russian economy, and Russian oligarchs and everybody in power, they don't appreciate when somebody interferes with their flow of cash. So that's tiny reason why they did it. The big reason, one of the major reasons, is gas. Okay, now Russia sells gas to Europe, and at a certain point in history, the sale of gas was up to 70% of Russia's budgets, or close to that, which is enormous amount. Even if it's 10%, it's quite big already. But resource selling to Europe was one of the most strategic businesses that Russia had with the European Union. And in 2000, I don't remember, 9 or 11, something like that, they started to find gas. And about 2013, like, they were starting to sign contracts for development of that gas. Now, and development of that nature is long process. It's a big investment and so on and so forth. But Ukraine has one kind of edge on all of that, is because Ukraine already has pipelines that are going to Europe. Russia delivers all of its gas through Ukrainian pipelines. These are leftovers from Soviet era, doesn't matter, whatever it is, but Russia loses that edge. And if the price is very competitive, Russia can entirely lose that market for years, decades, and so on. So this is completely unacceptable. So in 2013, some of the contracts were already signed. And as soon as those contracts were signed and the execution was about to start, Russia started the war in Donbass and Lugansk area. That's the primary reason. That's the main reason. It's the pipelines. It's potential interference with Russia's monetary markets, potential sales, existing sales, and so on. And this is not the first time that Russia did it. They did it so many times. If you look pretty much anywhere in the world where Russia is involved in some sort of a war conflict, there is main objective is interfere with extraction of some kind of resource. It can be diamonds, it can be oil, it can be gas, it may be coal, uranium, whatever it is, they will interfere with this process. I'll give you a few examples. Iran-Iraq war. Russia was helping both sides at certain point in time. They didn't care who's winning, who's losing, how many people are dying. As long as the conflict goes, they're very happy that both sides are losing, because both sides cannot work on their oil and gas development. Great for Russia. Absolutely great for Russia. Iranian Revolution in 79, again, great example. If you don't know about that time, Iran was bringing pipelines into Europe. They didn't like that, so they helped. They pushed the ideology. They pushed the Communist Party to power, and when that happened, all these projects went to shit. Afghanistan war, same thing. They talking about, again, discrimination against communist parties of Afghanistan. This is all excuses to get into the war. The fact is, there was potential for pipelines from the region, so Russia could not allow that to happen. And you need to understand, it's not just because they were making money, it's because this was the only money they could have and earn to make sure that Soviet Union survives. Okay, Soviet Union was in poverty. They were buying basic food in foreign countries, in Canada, in Americas. They were buying grain. There was literally, in the biggest country in the world, with one of the biggest populations, with most of the land, with most of the water, they couldn't produce something simple as bread. They actually need foreign grain for that. How they paid for that? They paid with the gas and oil dollars. They needed that money. So if anybody would interfere, the whole notion, this big idea of socialism, communism, everything would collapse because people will just starve to death. So Russia would always fight, well, literally out of poverty, out of incompetence of its government, and that was there from beginning of time. They will always fight. So those pipelines, the potential gas extraction from Ukraine in 2013, that's the one. Another example, sorry, they're in chaotic order. Syria. Syria has a potential, there's some oil there, there's some gas there, but pipelines from Middle East could go through Syria. And right now, the very first thing is there was a hope for stabilizing the area. Saudi Arabia is like, hey guys, do you want to build pipelines? We're all in. And Turkey is like, sure, let's start working on the project, but they need the area stable. And what Russia did for almost a decade there, they made sure there's always conflicts, and they had their military presence there, so nobody will actually go there because Russian military will hire Russian mercenaries and they will destabilize any project in the area. So as soon as Russians are gone from the area, and as soon as there's potential for a stable government, it's like, hey guys, let's build pipelines. So Russia would always interfere with the pipeline. So this is one of the biggest reasons why Russia started war in Ukraine. Another big reason is political example. Ukraine is fairly big, fairly developed, and most importantly, very ambitious country. They want to live good life, and they're working on it slowly. There is corruption, there is crime, there is all the bad stuff like in any other country, but the objective overall, they're trying, they're improving. And if you look if you analyze and you compare all of the post-Soviet era countries, all the republics that broke up from Soviet Union, and they're not Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. If you look, Ukraine is pretty much one main example of democracy. This is primary country where democracy takes place. No matter what's happening, no matter who is in power, if Ukrainians are not happy with what's going on, they're marching on the streets, they're demanding shift, change, new elections, they're doing it. So where this comes in play, in the beginning of first Orange revolutions, Russia's like, not Russia, we can point it directly to the source. Putin comes on TV and somebody asks him like how he views those revolutions in Ukraine, and Putin says, and that was one of the original Putins, and he says, well, it's a democratic country, they can do whatever they want to do, it's their right. Sounds legitimate, sounds good. But then literally a couple of weeks later, he has a major shift in the behavior. Why? Because if in Ukraine democracy succeeds and they reestablish new government that will work towards improving lives of the people, this can set an example, precedents that in Russia, same thing can happen. And then somebody mentioned that to Putin, or Putin realized, probably some of the ministers and oligarchs is like, hey, what are you talking about supporting a democratic behavior in the neighboring countries? Every neighboring country is dictatorship pretty much, right? If you look Belarus, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, these are pretty much dictatorships. The only one that tried to have democracy was Georgia, and Russia invaded Georgia. So same thing Moldova as well. So everywhere there is potential for democracy, Russia tries to interfere and intervene and ruin it, and spend lots of money into a position, and so on and so forth. So literally a couple of weeks later, after Putin saying that democracy, it's their choice and they can do whatever, there is a major shift in the behavior, there is a major shift in news, the way the Ukraine portrayed it, the way those protests are explained is just disgusting. It's like they're like they just demonize the people on the streets, like and they talk they trying to defend whoever is in power, who is more geared towards Russia. That's the objective. So basically, the main example is, as soon as anywhere in the region somebody tries to have a democratic example, it's not compatible with Russian structure, and the first thing they do, they just intervene as much as possible. They have people in power, they're paying politicians, they're buying parties, they're buying news and stuff like that. They try and interfere with that process always, everywhere, not just in Ukraine, not just in Georgia or other countries, everywhere. We're talking about Canada, America, China, wherever they can interfere, whenever they can use their propaganda machine. And Russia's propaganda machine is enormous. Starting from late 60s, they spend billions and billions of dollars on newspapers, on radio stations, on TVs, on hosts, on politicians, you name it. And the way it's typically done, they either create a news agency or they will infiltrate an existing one, and the narrative will be 95% of information is relatively good, is adequate, it's a normal news, nothing to be suspicious of. But 5%, if it touches West and its democratic structure, then we'll try to demonize it as much as possible. If it touches Russia, if it's something horrible, they will try to downplay it if necessary, or just not mention it at all as if it didn't exist, or they will try to portray Russia in this beautiful light, like they are beacon of hope, they are beautiful people, nice, kind, helping, supporting, the way like, hey, they're trying to help in Syria. They were carpet bombing Syrian hospitals, carpet bombing, using chemical weapons in Syria, and at the same time they would say we're helping, we're destroying ISIS and stuff like that. They have no problem lying to anywhere. Recently, one of the top propaganda hosts complained that they're investing so much money in YouTube and other channels. It's like sometimes you wake up and 3, 4, 5, 600 channels. Imagine 600 channels being shut down because people are complaining, because these channels are pure Russian propaganda. So it started long ago, it's still in power, it's still in motion, it's still everywhere, and they're doing it, and they have no shame. So they cannot allow an example of democracy nearby and its close to its border to flourish. That's one of the big reasons. Okay, first one is finances, second one is democratic example, and finally they need motivation. Third reason is they need motivation. Russia on its own is extremely poor country. If you go outside big cities, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and there are several others, about 10 of them, which are like million people and above, you go outside of big cities, it's poverty. It's enormous poverty, and it's even hard to explain how bad the state is, and it's hard to believe, like you need to Google that, like actual Russia. It's extremely dark, it's extremely sad, and it's not safe. So I'll give you one example, and hopefully it will be enough for you. In 2024, not too long ago, they were happy to announce that that year they successfully made an improvement, and 5% of population, more than 5% of population gained access to properly running sewage system. 5% in Russia gain access to running water in their toilets and stuff like that. Just to let you understand, Russia is 140, they claim there are 144 million people there. They still have 13% left. Nearly 19 million people still don't have running toilets in their household. They go outside, and it's not porta potty, it's not your chemical bio toilet or anything like that. It's just a hole dug up in the middle of the road. Nobody cleans it. It stinks. It's horrible. Couple of wooden planks. often rotten ones, and there's a hole in it. That's it. And people, those wooden planks, they break very often, and every year guaranteed that somebody will fall into those toilets and they will die. Every year somebody dies in those toilets, and it's a common practice. And forget the fact that the temperatures sometimes are minus 30, 40, minus 50 in certain areas, and it's just impossible to be in such toilets. So it's a huge problem. This is just one of the examples, but sometimes hospital doesn't have a proper toilet, or they don't have hot water, or they don't have air conditioning, or they don't have electricity entirely. You see children going to school in winter coats. They cannot take off winter coats because the temperatures are freezing inside of the classroom. And how you solve this problem? Right, you start a war. Because during the wartime, people understand it's a wartime. So we are heroes, we're doing something, and everything else is secondary. This is a Russian mentality. This what kind of pushes them forward, that throughout the history there is some kind of war, they are victorious, and everything else can wait another 3, 5, 10 years, next election cycle, whatever it is. If you look at Russian history, for over 100 years, they only had 3 years without the war, without the conflict. Every single time there is excuse. We're fighting these enemies, we're fighting those enemies, we're fighting somebody for greater good of humanity, for greater good of entire planet. They're always making up these stories. The fact is, all of these wars are horrible. All of these wars were avoidable, including World War II. If Russia didn't collaborate with Hitler in the beginning of the World War II, it's most likely would not happen. Most likely, because Hitler, one of the things that he needed a lot was the resources, and main supplier of these resources, metal, oil, coal, all of that was supplied by Russia. So if Russia was not selling and doing business with Hitler, we might have significantly smaller or no Second World War at all. But that's a different story. So Russia used, and in 2008, there was a swift attack on Crimea. They took the region by surprise, without any aggressive action. There was no shots fired. They annexed Crimea, and there was huge boost in Russian support for Putin, and they kind of were targeting exactly the same thing this time. But again, they went against the entire country, not just Crimea, where they already had the military presence. And Ukraine is already a little bit more prepared because there is ongoing fights in Lugansk and Donetsk area, Donbass. So Ukraine was somewhat anticipating an attack. There was a resistance, and it didn't happen. It was anticipated that Russia will take over Ukraine within 3 days, and they will have the military parade in the Kiev, celebrating and showing and installing new government, and showing how they came to save those poor Russian-speaking people who were demonized and they were talking about persecuted and crucified. There is literally a story made that Ukrainian Nazis took a Russian-speaking boy and they just literally nailed him to the fence, and wooden fence, and it went on all of the Russian channels. And as many people try to investigate and find the story and confirm it's true, it never happened. And that woman later was found participating in multiple hoax stories demonizing Ukraine. So if you're actually looking for reasons, in conclusion, why Russia attacked Ukraine: 1, finances; 2, example of democracy; and 3, they needed to boost their ratings within Russia itself, and they needed a swift, quick war to demonstrate how glorious they are. And there's tiny bits and tiny aspects and some other ideas, but these are 3 primary reasons why Ukraine is under fire right now. And if you understand the reasons, you understand that Russia will not just stop the war easily or quickly, because these objectives still not there, and they will continue fighting, and they will continue the genocide of Ukrainian people until as long as they have money. That's it for today. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Have a good one. Bye bye.